Okay, good evening, everybody. We're going to make a start in this evening. We're going to delve into chapters 20 and 21 of the book of Tanya. And in it, we're going to discover some profound ideas in understanding monotheism and idolatry. But before we get there, there's a teaching of Rabbi Zalman, which is called radical monotheism by some. This teaching that we're going to delve into in chapter 20 and 21 can be called the centerpiece of Rabbi Zalman's worldview. It is the idea that really revolutionizes Jewish Kabbalistic thought that Rabbi Zalman taught. Didn't invent the idea, but he taught it more in depth than anybody had ever done before. And when we study this, it will change everything, our understanding of everything. It's not something that is easy to grasp at first glance. It's an idea that has to sink in over time, and it's something that permeates almost every single discourse, teaching, and idea in Rabbi Zalman's copious writings. And we're going to at least dip our feet in it this evening. But to get there, we're going to quote somebody a little bit different. Richard Dawkins, possibly the high priest of atheism today, if you don't mind the phrase, has quite a strong little argument. And this is often quoted by those who argue for atheism. He says, we are all atheists about most of the gods that humanity has ever believed in. Some of us just go one God further. Meaning? What does that mean?
Just means we don't believe in, the atheists don't believe in the God.
So the first sentence, or the first part, is saying that we're all atheists about most gods. Don't call me an atheist, Richard Dawkins says. You're also an atheist. You're an atheist about most gods in history. I mean, how many gods are there throughout history? How many gods have there been? Thousands. There are, we can't count it. There have been so many different religions or shades of religions and beliefs, mythologies. Some are still around today, many of them are extinct, but in the history of humankind, there have been many, many, many gods that have been believed. And so somebody who claims today to be a believer in God, singular, is an atheist of all those gods, plural. Right? You believe in that God, you don't believe in all of those gods. So we're all atheists about most of the gods. If you percentage-wise, most gods we are atheists of, we who call ourselves believers. Those who call themselves atheists have just gone one God further. That not only all those thousands of gods do they not believe in, they also don't believe in the one God that believers today claim to exist. So what? What's his point? What's the argument here? What's he trying to get at?
I think he's trying to get at an artificial equivalence. Let's say Thor, the god of thunder, or a particular statue that existed at some stage, and what we now regard as God. These are all equivalent.
Right. So he's equalizing all the gods that have ever been believed in, including the God that we believe in, and saying, just like you've rejected those gods, I've rejected your God. And therefore, what does he want us to conclude from that? Is he just stating an interesting fact here? He's trying to convince us of something. There's an argument here. And that is, why is he trying to equate the disbelief in Thor or Zeus and the disbelief in God? Because he's saying, don't say that I'm so different to you. We've got actually a lot in common. That your belief is just that one little percentage of belief, but you're majority an atheist. I'm just a tiny bit more of an atheist than you. I've just taken it a step further. But more than that, not only are we very similar, percentage-wise, a believer and an atheist, but more than that. If you look at the percentages, the atheist is looking like the odds are with him. Because if you agree that all the thousands of God that ever existed are false, they don't exist, and you're just holding on to your belief in that one God, how likely are you to be right? Statistically, gods have not done all that well. You agree with that. So what makes you think yours is going to go any better than the previous thousands that have been rejected? And so this argument makes belief look a little bit silly. That atheism is the default. That's what we all have. Just some of us have this smidgen of belief left. Whereas others have made this the next step. They've gone one God further. Now, this argument is very often quoted in debates between atheists and believers. In one way or another, in different forms, it's often brought up as one of those knockout lines. That when you say that, what's a believer going to say to this? What response could you possibly have to such an argument? Well, what response could you possibly have? If you're a believer and an atheist presents this argument to you, what do you say back? Any suggestions?
I'd probably say it doesn't really matter. It really doesn't matter. That's just a belief that you have. And I just don't know what you believe.
So the fact that you don't believe in God, I do. And whether we agree on Thor and Zeus or not is just not relevant. True? Yeah. So is the logic flawed, or is it just, that's logic, and this is belief?
I don't think you can apply too much logic to belief.
Right, belief is not a logical thing. So you're arguing statistics on a matter of faith. It's just, they just don't go together. You don't say, well, statistically, gods have failed, so yours most likely will as well. It's using the laws of logic to try and describe faith. Yeah? True. Any other responses? Within the laws of logic, does this hold? Does it stand? Does it sound right to you?
Not when you're trying to correlate it to monotheism, because you're basically stating that there's only one God. So stating that there are 500 that came before it that were irrelevant doesn't really provide any logic, because you're stating that you're agreeing there's only one God and this is the God, versus those that were just mythical characters.
Right. So in our eyes, the God that we believe in is not the mythical God. I mean, even the people, the nations who used to believe in those gods don't believe in them anymore. So to compare our God to a mythical character, we say is unfair. Richard Dawkins might say, no, it's pretty accurate. Your God is also mythical, and you've got your myths, just because we hold on to them today, and those ones have been forgotten. I saw one interesting response to this one that says that the logic here is actually flawed. Let's compare it to another situation. Imagine a married man having a discussion with a celibate monk. And the celibate monk describes his life. He's abstaining from any relationship with any woman. That's the promise that he's made, and that's how he lives. The married man is married. He has a wife. And he says, your life must be difficult. How do you manage? Must be hard, going against nature. I mean, I can't understand how you do it. And the celibate monk says, what do you mean? We're not so different. You, as a married man, have abstained from all the women in the world except for one. I have gone one woman further. What would you say to that? There's something wrong with the logic. Something doesn't fit there. The words are right. The mathematics is correct. But is that a comparison?
The statement's just a sales pitch. Why don't we agree on what we agree on, and let's marginalise what we don't. But that minute minority that we're marginalising is actually the big point of difference.
Yeah. Well, comparing it to this celibate guy, is he right? Is a married man celibate from all the women in the world except one? Can you say that? It's playing with words. You can't be celibate from all the women in the world except one. That's not what it's called. Married to one woman doesn't mean there are no other women who exist. They don't exist. Even though many women would like their husbands to say that, it doesn't happen. It's not. The fact is that other women still exist as other women, but they're still there. I'm not denying their existence. I'm not saying they cannot be married. I'm not saying even I couldn't be married to them. I'm saying I'm married to this one. And therefore, I'm faithful to her, and my eyes are only focused on her. But not that the others don't exist. I'm not celibate to them. It's not an impossibility. They're not out of the realm of reality. Whereas somebody who is celibate completely is completely off limits to all women. That's not comparable. It's not just a little bit more than being married. It's a different world entirely. Here as well, when we say that we deny the reality of Thor and Zeus and all the false gods that were once upon a time and are still today believed in, we're not saying that they don't exist in concept. Their concept exists. They may represent a certain reality. They're just not God. People worship the sun because they understood the sun as giving power to the world. The light and the warmth of the sun causes the crops to grow, gives us life and existence, and so people worshipped it. When monotheism came around and said, no, you can't worship the sun, it's not saying because the sun doesn't exist. It is a power, it is an existence. It is not to be worshipped. It is not the source of existence. There's only one God that is the source of existence, who created the sun. And so therefore the sun god, which was some type of image that represented the sun, the power of the sun in heaven, that is an idol that we deny. We don't deny it exists. The sun exists. Its power exists. But it's not independent. There's only one God. So the way we are towards the false gods is not an atheist, just like the way a married man is to other women is not celibate. It's the wrong word to use. The believer in one God believes in that one God, denies the truth of other gods. But the word God really means a power. There are other powers. They're just not gods. They're not to be worshipped. They exist. Just like the man who's married to one woman says the other women exist, but they're not mine. So if you ever get stuck in that debate, there's a way you could counter it and see if there's a counter argument for it. I have yet to see a counter argument back to that one. That's monotheism, the belief in one God. What we're going to look at tonight is radical monotheism, which is a step further than that. And radical monotheism would answer this question in a much deeper way as well. Judaism very clearly has a problem with idolatry. We know that the first Jew, Abraham, was famous for being an iconoclast, an idol smasher. His father happened to be an idol seller. He had a shop selling idols. And the story, the tradition goes that his father was out once, asked him to look after the shop. Abraham had meanwhile discovered the truth of one God on his own. He believed in one true God who is invisible, who is not limited to the physical senses. And therefore he didn't believe in all these idols. His father went out shopping, or was out for, and asked him to look after the shop. And Abraham smashed all the idols. Took a hammer, smashed all the idols in the shop, except for one, which he put the hammer in the hand of that idol. When his father came back and said, what happened? What's going on here? So he said, you wouldn't believe it. Somebody came with a sacrifice, an offering, and there was a big fight. And all the idols started fighting who should get this offering. The big one smashed all the other ones and got the offering. So his father said, Abraham, I made these idols. I import them. I know where they're from. What do you mean they don't fight? So he says, if you yourself say that these idols can't move, but you worship them as if they created heavens and earth, what are you thinking? That was his argument. Eventually his father came around to his beliefs as well. But Abraham was the first iconoclast, and being the first Jew meant smashing idols, smashing the belief in other gods. They say that when he was 3 years old, he already started philosophizing about the truth, and he felt that God cannot be a part of creation. God must be beyond creation. And God must be an ultimate being. And if you're an ultimate being, you can only be one. You can't have more than one infinite, ultimate, absolute beings. And this he figured out on his own and started teaching it. So we see from the very beginning of Jewish belief that idolatry is a problem. In the central teachings that came from God at Mount Sinai, the 10 Commandments, the first 2 involve the concept of idolatry. The first one in a positive way says, I'm the Lord your God, meaning you should have a belief in God. And the second one, you shall have no other gods before me. Do not worship idols. The very first 2 of the 10 Commandments. And while there's discussion as to who heard the 10 Commandments, whether the Jewish people as a whole heard the entire 10 Commandments or not, there's no debate that the first 2 of the 10 Commandments, God directly spoke to the entire nation. And meaning that they are the most important and central teachings of Judaism. I'm the Lord your God, and have no other gods. In fact, the very name Jew, the word Jew in Hebrew is Yehudi, and the correct translation of Yehudi means that somebody who accepts the one God by negating idolatry. Meaning that the very identity of being Jewish is to negate the idea of many gods and to stand for ethical monotheism. There's one God that expects you to live a moral life. Not many gods that are there to be bartered with and bargained with, but one God who expects you to live morally, who has expectations of you, not you having demands on him. That is what Yehudi, a Jew, actually means. That's the identity of a Jew. So idolatry, the prohibition of idolatry, the fight against idolatry, is not something that's just peripheral or a part of Judaism. It's central to Jewish belief. It's what defined Abraham. It was the very revelation of Mount Sinai, the very beginning of what God spoke to the Jewish people, and it is the very name, Yehudi, a Jew, is one who believes in the oneness of God and rejects idolatry. This strong emphasis seems a little bit perhaps overdone. Maybe once upon a time there was a great pull towards idolatry. It was very tempting. It was very ubiquitous. Everyone was worshipping idols, and so to worship this one God was a difficult thing. To us today, it seems a little bit foreign. What's the big deal about idolatry? Why would people go for it? And why do we have to be so against it? Why do we have to identify so strongly with monotheism against idolatry? Why does it have to be in the very first 2 commandments so written and specified and spelled out that you can't worship other idols? Is it such a big deal today? Once upon a time when the world was worshipping idols, we understand. But for us today, is it still an issue, idolatry? Is it still a temptation? It's very puzzling when we read in stories of Tanakh in the Hebrew Bible, great leaders of Judaism were tempted and sometimes fell for idolatry, started worshipping idols. And we know that the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed because the Jewish people started worshipping idols. It's very puzzling. The golden calf, when the Jewish people had just left Egypt, they built a golden calf and got involved in idolatry. It seems that there is some pull, something very powerful about idolatry that we just don't relate to anymore at all. Indeed, the sages say that in the times of the first temple, the holy prophets of the time got together and nullified the temptation to worship idols. They actually got rid of it. Somehow, spiritually, they were able to get rid of the pull of idolatry, and so therefore it became not interesting anymore. We lost interest in idolatry. That somehow they were able to uproot the desire, and since then it's not such a big deal. And yet still today, it is a central part of being Jewish to be this iconoclast, to break the idols, to not believe in idols. In fact, we're told that the most important prayer in Judaism is the Shema Yisrael prayer. Shema Yisrael is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That prayer we're supposed to say when we get up in the morning, before we go to sleep at night. It's the prayer on the lips of a person on their deathbed. The last words they should say, if they're able to, is Shema Yisrael. It's a central part of Jewish belief. It's the line of Judaism. And what does it say? God is one. Which again seems a little bit of an anticlimax. God is one. We're over that already. We've got that already, that there's one God. It doesn't seem to be such a dramatic statement that there's one God. So why is this so central? Why is this so important? Why do we make such an emphasis on this? Is it that idolatry and monotheism are just a mathematics game? Idolatry is there are many gods who created the world and who have influence and force on the world. Monotheism is there's one God. And so what Judaism is coming and saying is that you're mathematically incorrect if you're an idol worshipper. You got it wrong. There aren't these many forces around. There's only one. Shema Yisrael, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is one. There aren't many gods. Is it merely a mathematical thing? And that's all? Are we saying that to believe in many gods, it's an accounting mistake. You miscalculated. You miscounted. There's only one, there's not many. Is that the real difference between monotheism and idolatry? Many gods versus one? Or like Richard Dawkins says, that we're all atheists except for one, and some people went one more. Is it just a mathematics game? Is that all that it comes down to? It must not be that. It must be something more profound than that. This fight against idolatry and this standing up for monotheism must be more than just a numbers game. So what actually is it? There are several verses that describe God, and these verses we're going to see what their full depth is. The first one is from the book of Malachi, one of the prophets of Israel, who said, I am God, I have not changed. In the name of God, he says this, I am God, I have not changed. Meaning, God is not a changing being. God doesn't shift and change. God is what he always was. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. We quoted before, the Shema Yisrael. There's a verse that says, there is none besides him. Meaning, there's no God besides him. There's another verse that says, you are the same before the world was created. You are the same since the world was created. Right, the first and the last verse implying that God does not change. The middle two verses talking about God being one. There's no other God but besides him. Now, these verses, on their simple reading, are saying quite simple things. There's one God, not many. There's no other God. God doesn't change. He was before the world was created, and after the world was created, he's the same. But when we study into Tanya, as we're about to do, we're going to see how these verses are brought alive. A new depth is brought to these ideas. The oneness of God is something much more than talking about there's not many gods. It's a much more profound idea than that. Let's have a look in the text now. This world, and likewise all supernal worlds, do not affect any change in his blessed unity by their having been created ex nihilo, which means from nothing. For just as he was all alone, single and unique before they were created, so is he one and alone, single and unique after they were created, since beside him everything is as nothing, verily as null and void. What Rabbi Zalman here is saying is that this world and all supernal, all spiritual worlds do not make any effect, any change in God. What God was before the world was created and what he is after the world was created, there's no difference whatsoever. That's what it means when it says, I am God, I have not changed. As we saw the verse at the top here, or the bottom one in our daily prayers, you were the same before the world was created, you were the same since the world was created. What this means is that God is unchanged from the world being created, which is a little puzzling. How can you say that God is the same before the world was created and after the world is created? How can there be no change in God? We understand he didn't change his identity. He didn't change who he is. God is who he always was. That we understand. When we read the verse, I'm God, I have not changed, meaning I don't change my mind. I don't become something else. I don't suddenly become a human being. Or I don't suddenly change my laws or choose another nation. That's what it means God doesn't change. But Rabbi Shnei Zalman here in chapter 20 is telling us that no, God is completely unchanged from before the world was created and after the world was created. It did not impact him at all. How can that be? If I'm standing here in this room alone and somebody else walks into the room, am I changed? Yeah? No? I mean, something happened to me? I'm no longer alone. I am still me. I haven't become somebody else, but I'm not alone in the room anymore. Even if I don't notice that person has come into the room, I'm not alone. I'm not here by myself. Something has happened to me. I am somehow affected on some level. Maybe I don't transform into a different being, but in the presence of somebody else, I'm not alone. Something has happened. Here Rabbi Shnei Zalman says, no, just as he was all alone, single and unique before they were created, so is he one and alone, single and unique after they were created. Since beside him, everything is as nothing, verily as null and void. Meaning, God was there, nothing else was there. Then he created a universe, and he's still alone. It's still just him. That doesn't make sense. You can't, in the same breath, say he created a universe, and yet he's still alone, unchanged. There's nothing else. It's all null and void. There's nothing. This is very confusing. And we better sort this out before the evening is over. Because we walked in here feeling sort of like we exist. And worried about our lives, and we've got to do things, and we've got places to be. Now we're being told nothing happened. The universe was created, no change. It's like nothing. God is the same as he was before. Nothing has occurred. So we're not here? What's going on here? So the key to this is in something that in passing he seems to mention on the third line there, that by the having been created ex nihilo, because the world was created ex nihilo, in Hebrew yesh ma'ayin, something from nothing, for that reason no change is affected in God. And this we need to explain. Again, this is the central feature of Rabbi Shnei Zalman's thinking. This idea is what we've got to really get clear. There is something unique about the creation of the world that is not like any other creation. Any other creation that any human being can achieve is making something from something. God creating the universe is making something out of nothing. And that nobody else can do. Meaning, when you make a cake or paint a painting or build a building, anything you do is taking ingredients, is taking material, shaping it, changing it, building it into something new. Your creativity, your ability to be creative, is to take existing reality and reshape it into a new existence. But what you cannot do is take nothing and make it into something. Even though there are some people who seem to do this in the kitchen, there's nothing in the fridge and they make a whole dinner out of it. But it just seems that way. There must be something in the fridge to make something out of it. You can't take nothing and make something out of it. You can take what seems like nothing, but not absolute nothingness. Any creation we do, anything we make, anything we build, is taking something and making something else. Taking some things, rearranging them to make something new. So if you're a craftsman, you can take wood, you can take a knife, a carving knife and your wood, and you can carve out of the wood some beautiful carving. But you had a knife and you had the wood, you had things to make that out of. You can't sit there with no knife, no wood, and make a sculpture out of it. It's nothing. There's nothing there. Everything we do is something from something. God created the universe out of nothing. Meaning, before the universe was created, there was nothing, no ingredients, no raw materials, nothing to work with, and God made something. He made the universe. There was a moment in time that there was nothing, and a moment later, there was something. What was that something made out of? Nothing. Where did it come from? Nothing. There was a beginning. That is something that no human being can do. We can't do that. Why? Because we are somethings. And for us, somethingness and nothingness are two opposites. You can't put them together. You can't take nothingness and make it into somethingness. We're somethings. But God is neither a something or a nothing. He's beyond them, the two. So therefore, He can take nothing and make something. Why not? Not only can we not make something out of nothing, we cannot imagine something coming out of nothing. It's not something we can comprehend, that there was nothing and then there was something. How? Where from? Our mind is so conditioned to understanding that every something comes from another something. So where did it come from? What made it? What's it made out of? That's the way we think, because that's all we know. We can't even conceptualize a nothingness becoming a somethingness. It's beyond our imagination. And yet, that's what God did. That is what creation is. This is what ex nihilo means, or in Hebrew, yesh ma'ayin, something out of nothing. That's the uniqueness of the creation of the world. Now, this has ramifications. The difference between making something out of something or making something out of nothing is not just that one is more impressive than the other, not just that one is something we can't do and God can. That's not the only difference. There's a much bigger difference to something out of something or something out of nothing. When something is made out of something, the somebody who made it is not needed anymore. When something is made out of nothing, the somebody who made it must keep making it for it to exist. If you make a cake, or a painting, or a wood carving, you make it, it's done, you can leave, you can retire, you can move to another country, and it will still be there. It no longer needs you. You've done what you needed to do, you've made what you made. It's not dependent on you for its existence, even though you made it, but you didn't make its very being, you just created it from something. You rearranged its ingredients. So once you've done that, it doesn't need you anymore. But if you make something out of nothing, that something needs you to remain a something. It can't remain a something without you because it's not a something without you. Its somethingness came from nothingness. And without you making it something out of nothing, it'll go back to being nothing. So my somethings that I make out of something don't need me anymore. But if I would make something out of nothing, it needs me to remain. Otherwise, it'll go back to being nothing. Let's illustrate this to understand it a bit better. The idea is that when an external force is causing something, then if that external force is the only source of it happening, that source must continue for it to continue. The Kabbalists and the mystics in Hasidic writings particularly use one metaphor. The metaphor of a flying object. Let's in modern terms speak about an aeroplane. Do aeroplanes fly? Well, they look like they do. Aeroplanes fly, but is it flying, or is it being made to fly? An aeroplane is a big chunk of metal. It's very heavy. Heavy things don't usually fly in the air. So on its own, this piece of metal doesn't fly. There needs to be some fuel, some force, some mechanism to make it fly. Something is making it fly. It doesn't fly on its own. It's not that an aeroplane made in this shape is a flying being. It doesn't fly. There is an engine, there's a mechanism that causes it to fly, that fuels it to fly. If that fuel ran out, if that mechanism malfunctioned, you would very soon see that aeroplanes don't fly. There's an outside force that causes it to fly. As long as that force is making it fly, it'll fly. As soon as it stops, it's gone. The flying ends. The natural place for an aeroplane to be is on the ground. And if there's not a force making an aeroplane go in the air, that aeroplane is going to come back to the ground. So flying in an aeroplane is actually new to the aeroplane. It needs to be introduced to it. As long as there's a force pushing it, it will fly. As soon as it ends, it'll go back to being stationary. A metaphor that will take it a bit deeper and a bit clearer, because an aeroplane, it may fall, but it doesn't disappear into nothingness. Whereas what we're suggesting is that something out of nothing will return to nothingness if the somebody doesn't keep it going. Which means that God, who created the world out of nothing, made it into something, has to continue creating it for it to be something. Otherwise, it'll go back to its nothingness. God did not once upon a time create the world. He has to constantly be making it happen. Otherwise, it will be back to nothing. If God would leave the world, as it were, take his mind off the world, then the world would return to its nothingness. Like a plane, when its force that's pushing it up disappears, it comes back down. It'll go back to its default position. A metaphor that makes this a bit clearer. Even though I said earlier that there's no possibility of a human being creating something out of nothing. We can't do that. But there's one thing that we can do that is sort of like creating something out of nothing. And that is our imagination. The human being has the capacity to imagine things, to conjure up images in our mind that may or may not be based on any reality. Now, the truth is, it's not really out of nothing. We can't really imagine something that doesn't have any existence, but we can create a scene that is totally our creation, that is our invention. So you could sit here, and this is something that sometimes we do, particularly in lectures, sometimes late at night. Our mind wanders, and we start imagining ourselves somewhere else. I'm not talking about when you're actually dreaming because you're asleep. I'm saying you're even awake, but you're daydreaming. So let's have a daydream together. Let's imagine that we are not sitting here, but we're in a very different place. We're in a forest. We're in a rainforest, surrounded by trees and greenery, and we hear the chirping of beautiful birds, and there's a waterfall not far in the distance that we can hear falling down, and there's various exotic animals that are jumping from tree to tree, and you're just walking through this rainforest with these beautiful sights and sounds surrounding you. The cool air is blowing into your face, and you're smelling the fresh smell of fruits that are growing wild all around you in this rainforest. Okay, now we're back here in Shul again. Forget about the rainforest. Where did it go? Where's that rainforest now? The rainforest that you were just walking through. Where is it now? Is it there? It's gone? But where's the waterfall? There was like a massive waterfall falling. The trees, where are they? birds, animals, fruits. It's gone. Is there a bit left? Like, can I get a little bit of it? No. You can imagine it again. Is that the same rainforest if you imagine it again? Have you gone back to the rainforest if you imagine it again? No, that's a new rainforest. If you start imagining it again, then you're creating a new one. That's not the same one as was before. It might look the same, but it's not. That one was then. It's gone now. There's no trace of it. There's nothing left of it. If you start imagining it again, you're creating it again. But that's totally new. That's not what was there before. So as long as your mind was focused on this rainforest with its trees and birds and animals and fruits and waterfall, as long as you were thinking it, were imagining it, were conjuring it in your mind, it existed as a figment of your imagination. As soon as your thought process was interrupted, as soon as you refocused on the here and now, that rainforest disappeared without a trace. There's nothing left of it. No smell, no taste, no sounds, it's all gone. Why? Because the rainforest was a figment of your imagination, it was your creation. So it's really part of you. As long as you're giving it attention, as long as you're giving it existence, it will exist. As soon as you take it away, it won't exist. Even if there were people in your rainforest, even if you found somebody else walking towards you in your rainforest, when you stopped imagining the rainforest, that person's life just ended. Not painfully. The person's not bothered by it at all, because that person is nothing more than a figment of your imagination. You created it. And so therefore, they're gone like they never were there. Even if that person had a history. Imagine you in your rainforest, imagine seeing a person, an elderly person, who is 90 years old and who has gone through 2 world wars and has come to this rainforest and has amazing stories to tell. And then you wake up, you forget about it. That person's gone. They didn't die, they disappeared. They never existed. The 90 years of their life never existed now because you've forgotten it. You created it and therefore you lost it and it's gone. This is the most similar thing we can experience to something from nothing. When you create a reality out of nothing, there's no ingredients. There are no leaves for those trees. There's no water for that waterfall. There's no ingredients to create that scene except for your own imagination. So that's similar to creating something out of nothing. And therefore, it only exists as long as you make it exist. As soon as you stop imagining it, it's gone. This, says Rabbi Shneur Zalman, is what creation is. Creation is God making something out of nothing. There was nothing, then there was something. How was the something there? Because God made it into something. So the only force making it into something is God. There's nothing about the universe that gives it existence. It's God that gives it existence. Like there's nothing about the waterfall in your imagination that makes it exist except for you making it exist. Like there's nothing about an aeroplane that makes it fly except for the mechanism, the flying mechanism in the aeroplane. So as long as that external force continues to bring it into existence, it exists. As long as your imagination continues focusing on the waterfall, it'll exist. As soon as your imagination is diverted to something else, it doesn't exist. It has no external power. It has no innate, independent existence. So too creation was made out of nothing, something out of nothing. Who made it into something? God. If God would stop making it into something, it would go back to its default position, which is nothing. Only as long as the divine energy is maintaining creation does creation exist. If God were to divert his attention from creation, go to another project, creation would not exist. It has no autonomous existence. Therefore, let's read again. Let's see if it makes sense now. This world, and likewise all supernal worlds, not just the physical world we're in, but all spiritual worlds as well, do not affect any change in his blessed unity, in the oneness of God, by their having been created ex nihilo, because they were created out of nothing. There's something out of nothing. And therefore, just as he was all alone, single and unique before they were created, so is he one and alone, single and unique after they were created, since beside him everything is as nothing, verily as null and void. Meaning, the universe that God created is like a universe you create in your mind. If you're sitting alone in this room, and you imagine somebody walking into the room, are you still alone? Yes. Nothing's changed. That is in your mind happening. God created the universe, but he didn't create the universe as an external reality, something separate from him. It's something that's totally dependent on him for its existence. It is something out of nothing. There's nothing outside of him that gives the universe existence. He bestows existence upon it. And so therefore, if its existence is totally dependent on him, then that universe cannot be said to be outside of him. And therefore, he has not changed. There's no reality outside of him. Things are exactly as they were before. Now you might be thinking, hang on a minute. If I sit here alone in the room, and I imagine somebody else coming into the room, okay, it's true, I'm still alone. There's nobody else actually here. But am I not changed by the fact that I'm imagining somebody in the room from before I imagined somebody in the room? Before, I was not thinking about somebody in the room, and now I am thinking about somebody in the room. So haven't I somewhat changed? And so how can we say that God created the universe out of nothing? Therefore, the entire universe, all existence, physical and spiritual, is really like a figment of his imagination. It's like a creation of his mind. It's totally dependent on him for its existence. But so he's still alone. There's nothing outside of him. There's no other existence. He's unchanged. Before he wasn't thinking about a universe. Now he is thinking about a universe. Isn't that a change? So for this we have to go a little bit further. For the coming into being of all the upper and nether worlds out of non-being, and their life and existence sustaining them from reverting to non-existence and naught, as was before, is nothing else but the word of God and the breath of his blessed mouth that is clothed in them. Meaning, the entire existence of everything is just because God is giving it existence. It doesn't have any existence of its own. So therefore you can't say that there was God and now there's God plus the world. That before the world was created there was just God, one thing. Now there's a world, so there's God and a world. So whatever space God was taking up before, he had all the room he wanted because he was living on his own. So he could take up all the space he wanted. And now he created a universe, so he's got to make a bit of space, move around so the universe can fit somewhere. That will be true of a creation that's outside of him. But it's not an external creation, it's an internal creation. The world is God's world. It is that he creates it, but he doesn't give it, there is no separateness to that world. There's nothing about it that it has of its own. There's nothing that's not God about it. Its very existence is God. So therefore, it's not like God had to make room for it, it's him. For a human being, we and our mind are two separate things. What you're thinking about now, and if you think about something later, you've changed, your mind has changed. For God, him and his mind are one thing. He's not divisible into him and his mind. So whether he's thinking of this or that, it's all him. He is infinite, he's all-encompassing, he's all-powerful. So there's nothing that's outside of him that adds to him. You can't add to infinity. And there's nothing outside of infinity. So God is all and all is God. Now I warned you that this idea is not such an easy thing to understand. Because who's understanding it? Who's trying to understand this idea? A something or a nothing? Who are you? You're a somebody understanding something, or you're a nothing not understanding it? Which would you prefer? Here we are discussing our nothingness. Who am I to talk about nothingness? You know, like the old joke they always say, I'll say it anyway, that on Yom Kippur, the rabbi gets up in front of the ark and says, God, I'm nothing before you. And then after him, the cantor, the chazan, God says, God, I'm nothing before you. And then the president of the shul goes up and says, God, I'm nothing before you. And the rabbi says to the cantor, look who thinks he's nothing. You think he's nothing? Who are we to think we're nothing? Who are we to think we understand that we're nothing? Can we have this discussion? So we don't exist now? This idea is not something that's so simple to understand. But what's interesting about it is Rabbi Shneur Zalman doesn't tell us to believe this. He proves it logically. He shows the logical sequence that we must not exist like we think we exist. Because undeniably, the world was created out of nothing. We have to say that. Even science says that. That eventually there has to be nothing that became something. What that something was and when it came about, that we can debate. But at some point, something came out of nothing. For something to come out of nothing, that is not a natural thing to happen. Nothingness and somethingness are two opposites. And so for nothing to turn into something takes a being that is beyond nothing and something that can turn something out of nothing. That's what we call God. But it's more than that, says Rabbi Shneur Zalman. If something came from nothing, if it came from nothing, the only thing making it something is that somebody, is God. And so it only remains something as long as God is making it remain something. Just like the characters in your imagination or your rainforest can only exist as long as you're giving it existence. It's not going to have its own existence. You can't walk away and the rainforest continues. The waterfall still flows. And so too God, because the world, the existence has nothing to fall back on, literally, so therefore God must continue to breathe it into existence. Or to think it into existence. To say it into existence, whatever metaphor you want to use. This idea has ramifications. This is not just a philosophical thought, theological thought, a deep idea. This has ramifications. Not just ramifications. This completely transforms our understanding of reality. That God is no longer a creator being somewhere in outer space. God is the truth of reality. He's the all. The world that we exist in is not just a world, it is a divine revelation. It is innately divine. We are not just beings on a search, but we are divine beings. And there's nothing outside of that realm. The world is constantly being recreated into existence, and that existence is not separate from God, it is God. We are playing out our lives in God's mind. And we're not separate from Him. It's a totally different way of understanding ourselves and God. So the difference between the human being and God, Rabbi Shneur Zalman explains, that the nature of the divine order is not like the creature of flesh and blood. The metaphor of creation in the Torah is that God spoke creation into existence. But when a man utters a word, the breath emitted in speaking is something that can be sensed and perceived as a thing apart, separated from its source. But with the Holy One, blessed be He, His speech is not heaven for fen, separated from His blessed self, for there is nothing outside of Him, and there is no place devoid of Him. So that's why thinking is in a way a better metaphor to understand the way God creates the world. Like we think a reality into existence, but that thought is still inside us, a part of us, not separate from us. So too God created the world, but it's inside of Him. Yet the Torah uses the speech as a metaphor. God spoke the world into existence. But not like human speech where you say something and it's outside of you and it doesn't need you anymore. God needs to constantly speak the world into existence. So why does the Torah use speech as a metaphor? Because from our perspective, we feel like we are outside of God. What creation achieved is that from God's perspective, nothing changed. From our perspective, a lot happened. There's a world, there's a universe, there's us, and we feel separateness, autonomous, and free, separate from Him. He spoke us into existence. He externalized us, meaning He made us feel like we are external. Otherwise, we wouldn't have free choice. If we would be the figment of God's imagination, if we would be the characters in His rainforest, so then we would be like puppets. We'd be doing whatever He wants. When you imagine people in your mind, they're you, and you decide what they say and they don't say. You can't have an imaginary conversation with somebody and get annoyed at them, even though we do that. But you're the one that made them say that, because it's your imaginary conversation. It's not fair, but we do it often. We imagine somebody is going to say something to us, and we think what we're going to say back to them, and then we see them, we're upset at them already. They didn't even open their mouth. You decided what they were going to say. You put the words in their mouth. Don't jump to conclusions. Let them speak for themselves. If you imagine a scene, then you're controlling it. So if we are God's imagination, do we have free choice? Or are we just doing what He's deciding that we're doing? We're just a part of His imagination. So here, the Torah says, well, no. We're like thought, but we're also like speech. God has made us feel autonomy. He's made us sense that sense of freedom. And so therefore, we choose what we do without realizing that we're actually in His thought. We do really have free choice. But that's because God bestowed that upon us. We're actually living in His mind, but we feel like we're outside of it. As he says, that when we call God's speech, His blessed speech is called speech only by way of an anthropomorphic illustration, meaning comparing it to a human being, in the sense that, as in the case of man below, whose speech reveals to his audience what was hidden and concealed in his thoughts, so too is it on high with the blessed Ein Sof, the Infinite One, whose emitted light and life force, as it emerges from Him from concealment into revelation to create worlds and to sustain them, is called speech. We use the metaphor of speech for creation because just like a human being, if I'm walking around thinking, you don't know what I'm thinking. If I say it, then you know. One of the gifts that God gave us is that we're able to think without anyone else knowing what we think. Because imagine if people knew what we were thinking. Then we'd really be in trouble. So most of us are gifted to be able to not say everything we think. So there are thoughts that come up in our mind and we say, I better keep my mouth shut on that one. I'm not going to say that. If we would say everything we ever thought, so then we wouldn't have many friends. If every time somebody walked in the room, we said to them what we thought, or if every time you'd be sitting next to somebody, you would hear what they were thinking, then we wouldn't talk to anybody. We wouldn't be friends with anybody. Because thoughts, all types of thoughts come to us. But most of us have the power to control not to say everything you think. What you say, you share with somebody else. What you think is your business. And so the Torah uses speech as a metaphor. God spoke the world into existence. God said, let there be light, and there was light. Because just like speech is to share with another, creation was to give otherness, was to create an other, us. We are the other. And so speech is used as that anthropomorphic metaphor, an illustration. Just like a human being speaks to share with another, God created the world in a way that it seems outside of him. So it's called speech. But there is thus no real change at all in his blessed self, but in the perception of the created beings who receive their life force from his blessed word. That our experience of our own identity is that we are free and separate from God. There's me and there's God. From God's perspective, it's very different. There's only God. He has not changed. It's all happening in his mind. He makes us feel like we were spoken, that we're separate from him. He gives us that autonomy as a sense, but it's not the true reality from his perspective. Now, these ideas are very profound ideas. They're not simple thoughts. Really contained in these ideas are all the theological paradoxes that the great philosophers have always debated on, including that of free choice. If God is all-encompassing and he knows everything, so then he knows everything that you're going to do. If he knows what you're going to do, then you don't have free choice to do otherwise. Because if you say, well, I could have done something else, no, you couldn't, because God knew you were going to do that, so you could not have not done that. So if God is all-knowing, we don't have free choice. On the other hand, if you say, no, we do have free choice, we could go this path or that path. Does God know which way you're going to go? Well, if you have free choice, you could go either way, then he must not know. Because if he knows, you could not have gone that other way. You just thought you had free choice. This teaching is answering that question. There's the way it looks from God's perspective and the way it looks from our perspective. They're two realities that God created. The paradox of free choice and knowledge is a paradox that God created. That on the one hand, everything is him. On the other hand, he's given autonomy to us. That, yes, it is a paradox. Creation is a paradox, is a duality. An even deeper paradox is God everywhere? Of course, God is everywhere. Are we here? Seems like it. So how can we both be here? How can God be everywhere and we're here as well? It is a paradox. If God is absolutely everywhere, so then are we here? The answer is yes, he's everywhere, and yes, we're here. Because there's two aspects, there's two ways of looking at it, there's two perspectives. There's the divine perspective that he is all, and there's our perspective that we are here. That perspective God created. He created our perspective. There is a paradox at the center of existence. What Rabbi Shneur Zalman is trying to introduce to us is that we shouldn't always look at things from our perspective. We should start to appreciate it from God's perspective. That the challenge of the human being is to not just be limited by the finite human view of reality, but to start to see it the way God sees it. Your default attitude is that I exist and I'll think about God. I'll see if I think he exists. His existence is something we believe. Our own existence is something that we know. The divine way of looking at it is God exists and you are a part of that existence. You're a part of his existence. And our challenge is to refine our minds, to elevate our minds, to be able to appreciate the divine perspective, to look at it from his outlook. That there's just him, his existence, and our existence is a part of his. But that is a meditation. That is an ongoing meditation. Because when you see things from that perspective, then you're not stuck in yourself. You're not stuck in your ego. You're not the center of the universe. There's a divine imprint in everything. There's a divine flow. There's a divine meaning to everything. There's not my life that I'm trying to get by and things getting in my way. There's just God and nothing else. Nothing else exists. There's not the path that I'm trying to achieve and there's all these obstacles coming in my way to make my life difficult. No, there's just God. And He's the path and He's the obstacle. It's all Him. There's not life as I like it to be, and then the things that annoy me, that prevent me from living the life I want. There's just divine. There's just God. And everything that happens is divine, and is God, and is the path, and is where we're supposed to be. When you start to assimilate these ideas, look at the world in this way, there's nothing outside of God, so then you start to appreciate the oneness of God. And so this is what it means in these verses. I'm God, I have not changed. That from God's perspective, there's just God before the creation of the world. Now there's a world, God is still it's just Him. There's nothing separate from Him. When we say Shema Yisrael, we're not just saying that there's one God and not many gods. God is one means He's the oneness. He's it. There is nothing else. He's the oneness of everything. When we say the prayer Shema Yisrael, we cover our eyes because when we look around, we see many. We see a world. We cover our eyes and say, really, there's just one. There's nothing else that exists. There's only God's oneness. There's not two forces in the world, good and bad. There's not what's supposed to be and then things that stop what's supposed to be. There's just what's supposed to be. And everything in the world is to bring out goodness in the world, including that which seems bad. It's there to bring out goodness. And that's our mission, to bring out the oneness, the good that there is hidden in the world, the oneness of God. When it says there's none besides Him, it doesn't mean there's no other God besides Him. There's nothing besides Him. There's no force. There's nothing at all besides Him. There is only God. Because He's the same as before the world was created, and He's the same since the world was created. So while idolatry is seeing that there's a world and there's many gods, many gods doesn't just mean statues that you bow down to. It means there's many forces pulling us in different directions. That there's God that wants us to be good, but then there's societal pressures that we have, and there's our own inner urges, and there are so many different pulls pulling us in different ways. There are so many forces that we chase after. There are many gods that we create for ourselves. That's idolatry. Monotheism is that no, there's one God who created the world. But radical monotheism is that the world is God. There's nothing outside of God. It's not just that there's one God who created the world. It's that the world, the universe, reality, us, we are part of that divine reality. And so when we are true to that mission, when we're true to the vision of revealing the divine in the world, so then we're true to reality. When we block that, when we interrupt that, when we don't reveal goodness in the world, so then we're going against our true reality, our own self, which is God. That is radical monotheism. So in conclusion, there is no existence outside of God. God is not just one, He's the only one. Not the only God, the only existence. This is a meditation. This is when we say the Shema, we should meditate on this idea that God is the only true existence. There's no force outside of Him. We are the words that He speaks, His imagination. We are living, we are that universe that is inside of God. But don't think being God's imagination is insulting. That is real. Being God's imagination is as real as it gets. The very definition of reality is being God's imagination. If I were a figment of your imagination, no offense, but I'd feel a bit offended. Because that means I'm just your imagination. And you can stop thinking about me and I'm gone. So even when I was there, I wasn't all that real. But if I'm God's imagination, that's as real as it gets. God's imagination. It's not just you or me thinking about something, it's God thinking about me. That's as real as reality is. So saying that we are God's imagination isn't belittling us, it's elevating us to the highest possible height. We're a part of God's reality. God bothered to think about me. God decided that I've got to be in His world. What is His world? Not a separate thing. It's the reality, the divine reality. So this is radical monotheism, that God is the true reality of everything, and that changes everything. That changes our view of everything. It changes our view of the challenges of life. It changes our view of God's position in the world and our view of self. And so when that's our thought system, which is one of the central permeating ideas of Rabbi Shneur Zalman's Tanya, so then believing in one God is not just one more God than an atheist. It's a completely different universe. It's that the entire universe is divine. God is not just one player in the universe that we believe in. God is the true reality of everything. And everything that happens is a part of that divine reality. That changes everything. Okay. Any questions?
I'm disturbed about something.
Yes.
If he's thinking about us and we're a part of his world, of him, then how is he thinking about those who are not very nice?
Okay, good question. So the question is, it's the existence of evil. This is the question. The question is, how can evil exist if everything is God? So that obviously deserves a full lecture, but I'll say a thought. And this is what the Hasidic thinkers say, that everything in the world exists because God wants it to exist. Right? Just like everything in your imagination, you want it to be there, so it exists. So everything in the world exists because God wants it to be there. But in His creation, He said there are certain things He does not want. He does not want evil. Right? God wants there to be goodness. He does not want there to be evil. And so at the beginning of creation, God said, I want good, I do not want evil. Does evil therefore exist? Well, from God's perspective, does it? If it's something He doesn't want, does it exist? Well, it must. You can't not want something that doesn't exist. But evil exists as the thing God doesn't want. If existence comes about from God wanting, so what comes about from God not wanting? A non-entity, a non-reality. There's a something, but a non-something. It's only when people do evil that you've given reality to something that was not supposed to be given reality.
Without a thing, we wouldn't have perception of good if we didn't have.
True, but
that good is good and evil is evil.
True, yeah. That's a reason why evil, but it still doesn't explain how could God create evil. If God is good and wants good, how can there be evil? So the answer is that God created the path you're not supposed to take. The flip side, the thing you're not supposed to do. Only when people do it does it have a reality which we call evil. The way God created it is the thing you're not supposed to do, so when you do good, it's good. It's supposed to be the path that's not taken. We learned earlier in Tanya that in Kabbalistic writings, the powers of evil are called Sitra Achra, which in Aramaic means the other side. Then they're not even given a name, just the other side. They're the other side, meaning the thing that's not supposed to be, the thing that you're supposed to avoid. That's how God created evil, the thing that's not supposed to be chased, that's not supposed to be expressed. And if that were to happen, if Adam and Eve would not have eaten from the tree, if they would have done what God told them to do and not what God told them not to do, so then evil would be this thing that you don't do. That's it. But as soon as people do it, you've given evil a reality that it doesn't deserve on its own. This is a much more profound topic, but that's the kernel of the idea.
So just to be clear, God is whole universe. So if there is life on other planets, it would be.
We're not just talking about our Earth, we're talking about the entire physical and spiritual worlds. Higher realms as well, absolutely.
Whatever our reality is, if we discover another planet, that's part of God's world.
Correct. It's not outside of God's world. Correct.
God gets a response from the world, though. So whether that's part of being changed, God gets pleasure, God gets angry, God.
Correct.
There's a certain what we would define a change, and whether that changes who he is, maybe not, but especially now, psychology would say, okay, yeah, there's a change because there is a reaction to the world.
Right. So that God's response to our actions, that he gets happy or sad or angry or these things, this is a conscious choice that God chose to be impacted by what we do. But that's not him. That's the way he interacts with us. It's a persona he puts on almost. It's like a parent that plays a game with a child and gets upset when they get, you play cricket with your child and you get upset when you get out. You're not really upset. Just for the child, you have to be upset because you want to play the game. And so it's for the relationship, but not because the impact is innate. It's that God wants that connection with us. So he allows himself to be affected. But that's not really changing.
It's more how we interpret.
Correct. Okay, we'll stop there. God willing, next week we'll continue with the next chapter that will take this further. And as we get through these chapters, we will see the flow. Each one seems to be quite disconnected to the one before it, but when we get to chapter 25, we'll see the flow of this entire thing. So hold on tight.